Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Catalyst webinar series presented by the Education Committee for the Southern California PGA. The Catalyst webinar series is a bi-weekly educational platform for creating success in your club and career. We are very proud, very excited to welcome Dottie Pepper to the broadcast this morning. We all know Dottie. She requires no introduction. She is a storied LPGA tour career resume that surmounts 17 victories, including 2 majors, both of which here in the desert at Dinah Shore twice. College career at Furman University, graduated with her bachelor's degree in 1987, was 2-time Furman University Female Athlete of the Year, 1987 Athlete of the Year, 3-time NCAA All-American, Southern Conference Athlete Player of the Decade in the 1980s, and of course, all of her victories on tour through the 90s. And since 2004, she's been the CBS golf analyst and lead walking reporter, covering many LPGA Tour events. Good morning, Dottie. Thank you very, very much for being here this morning on the Catalyst. Good morning.
Thanks, John, and welcome everybody. And I thank you for being out in front of this as the organizer, and also for Nikki Gatch. We go decades back, and for her to reach out to do this. I know this is MSR year, so everybody's trying to catch up and get things done by the end of the year. But I thought I would spend this time in what's become sort of an image-heavy presentation, going across some of the things, how I got to where I am now with CBS, and some of the things that I've learned in my really lifelong journey playing golf and being around the game. But first of all, I would start by saying I was in no way a prodigy, and as you'll see in these texts or in these images, I actually grew up on a turkey farm in Wilton, New York, and my grandfather owned this large operation. That's my dad to my right. This was 45,000 turkeys, and it went out of business in the early 70s as government restrictions took over, and many large family operations sort of disappeared in and around New York State and frankly across the country. But the guy to my right was really instrumental in who I am and how I got to be where I am, because this happened to him in 1968. My dad was on the cover of Sports Illustrated as one of the best rookies going into Major League Baseball. And I think you'll notice the guy in the middle and the back row being Johnny Bench, who is now, of course, enshrined in Cooperstown. But going across that back row is Alan Foster, played for the Dodgers, Mike Torres, who played for the Cardinals, and Cisco Carlos played for the Chicago White Sox, and actually came out to watch me play a golf tournament one year in Phoenix. But that's my dad, top left. He was signed the day he graduated from high school to the Detroit Tigers, and by 68, which of course the Detroit Tigers went on to win the World Series that year, Dad was a member of that organization. And as his career came to a close in the early 70s, after he'd been traded to the Montreal Expos, golf, as with so many retired athletes, became his passion, and his oldest daughter was tagging along. I was very fortunate, wrong direction, to in the early 80s meet a storied PGA professional in this area, who was actually a founding member of the Northeastern New York PGA section, by the name of George Pulver. And we worked together for 6 years. He died in 1986 when I was at Furman University. But his apprenticeship connections can be traced all the way through New York, through England, and to Scotland, right to the very beginnings of the game. So I was very lucky to have had the great fortune to work with George Pulver, because he was not only a teaching professional, he was an agronomist, he was a club maker, he was a golf course architect, and was very free with handing that information on to his students. And I happened to be just sort of in the right place at the right time when he was no longer a regular club professional. At one time, he was actually over 3 facilities, 2 during the summer here in Saratoga Springs. And he was just sort of my version of Superman. So as John said, I did go on to go to Furman. I was rookie in 1988 after going to the qualifying school with the Shanks. Somehow managed to survive and won 17 times on the LPGA, a couple of majors. This was the last at the Dyna. I guess for players of my generation, will always be the Dyna. Was able to play on 6 Solheim Cup teams, won one tournament on the JLPGA tour, and here's a shot with my favorite Solheim Cup teammate of all time, Brandy Burton, who incidentally, well, this shot was in '94 at the Greenbrier when Joanne Carner was captain, but incidentally, she was also inducted into the Southern California Golf Hall of Fame on October 29th, and I understand that it was quite the celebration. So through my playing career, there was some pretty fun stuff that happened. When you get to the top of I guess an industry, you have that opportunity, and one of the most fun things was at the 1993 ESPY Awards when Dennis Miller put my dress on after I had won the inaugural Women's Golf Award. Fred Couples had won the men's after winning the Masters in 1992, but we had a little fun with that. And anyway, it's made the rounds on social media every time the ESPYs pop up, and Dennis seems to like that shot too. So I retired from playing in 2004, July 1st, 2004. Did time with Golf Channel, with NBC, 3 years on the PGA of America's board, and in 2012 said goodbye to NBC and moved on, like I said, to the PGA's board for 3 years, and also at ESPN. And in 2016, joined the team at CBS, and then this year will be the lead walker for that team. And along with that very heavy PGA Tour schedule, along with the PGA Championship this year, will be in Northern California. I call my home at the Masters this shot, which I think is just one of the coolest shots in golf. The 13th is where my tower is, and the little teeny tiny tower back right. When the hole is cut back right, talk very slowly, very quietly, because you can actually hear it. The towers there are quite close. So as I mentioned, the keys to success, not so much from my playing days, but over the last 15 years from observing, being in the boardroom at the PGA of America, asking questions throughout, traveling across the world, just some of the things that I've picked up on as I've transitioned to a player who was really in charge of her own business, in charge of her life, in charge of her schedule, daily preparation, to going into being employed by a network, being involved on a board, and having the responsibilities of all of those change so quickly. I literally went from announcing my retirement at noon on Thursday to being on the air with a boss in my ear at 3 o'clock on that Thursday on July 1st, 2004. So things changed a lot, and they changed very quickly. I've also, through that time, learned that this is a really big, important part of that, because production meetings happen. There are a lot of people involved, and being respectful of their time is really key, because television is going to go on whether you're on time or not, and it's probably better if you're on time. But this also, I believe, translates across life. If you can be 10 minutes early, that's really what being on time is about. I've also, over these 15, coming up on 16 years of being in television, been really fortunate to work with some of the best producers in every platform, on every platform. And one of them was Mike McQuaid, who is ESPN's producer for multi-sports, multi-platforms, and a guy that I still have very regular contact with. And first and foremost, it is that he believes that it takes every member of a crew to put on a great show, not just you, not just the quote unquote talent, to check your ego. not to be super word heavy when you're giving a report, when you're in a tower, whatever, if you're doing an interview, to make sure that every word you say matters. To talk in short bursts. You don't necessarily, in a report, have the time or need to speak in complete sentences. And what you're trying to do as a reporter, even as an interviewer, is to report on the things that you see, the things that you hear, the things that you feel, not just what people can be able to see on a screen. So state the obvious, I guess, is the easiest way to say that. And finally, don't report to talk. Sometimes it's better in television and frankly in business too. You don't need to talk. It's okay to use both of those ears that you've been given to listen and let the pictures tell a much bigger story than you could possibly imagine telling. As evidence of this, I would throw up Curtis Strange, two-time U.S. Open champion, currently works for ESPN and Fox. And Curtis was one of the biggest egos in all of golf. He was self-motivated, hard competitor, really tough on himself and tough on everybody around him. But when you are looking at someone who has become an excellent broadcaster and who is always a great teammate, I would give no better example than Curtis Strange. Love every minute that I've gotten to work with this guy over the years, whether it was at the Open Championships, at the Masters. This one happens to be at the U.S. Open at Pinehurst, and just a very curious guy that you would have thought would have come into television thinking he knew everything. And it was never the case with Curtis, and continues to be that way. To the notion of it takes everybody on the crew to make a great show, I put up two guys that are sitting in our 18th tower at CBS. Jeff Shafter on the left, who is the spotter, and oftentimes throws little nuggets everybody's way because he really truly is Rain Man. If he heard a stat decades ago, it's going to come out and it's going to be correct. And that's just his hobby. He is a massive Detroit Tigers fan. If there's anything you want to know about the Tigers, he's the guy to ask. And the other guy in this shot is a guy by the name of Eric Lydell, and he is the new 18th hole cameraman for CBS. So he is out every week. He used to be one of the walking cameramen, some of the fittest people you could ever imagine, having the weight of that camera on their shoulder and literally running from shot to shot. He is tremendous at what he does, and has just gotten a boost back into the 18th tower. So not nearly as much of a toll on his body as it had been for decades. But the other lesson about these two gentlemen is that they might leave CBS now, but they've been with the other networks. And what happens across television, it is a big dysfunctional family that travels all across the world. And networks cross over, jobs cross over, contracts cross over, sports television rights cross over, but it's the people that remain the same. And it's those people that make what you see every week seem seamless, but it is absolute chaos. Here's another shot. This was just a couple of weeks ago at CBS football. And it was the Patriots hosting the Cleveland Browns. And on the left, you will see one of many people that makes CBS week in and week out, whether it is golf, whether it's football, whether it's basketball. A guy with the Adidas 3 stripes on his back is Tom Spencer, and he is Jim Nance's go-to guy. He is a spotter for the NFL. He's a statistician for CBS Golf. And it takes a lot of people, as I said, to make all of this chaos seem so seamless. The guy in the center is Kevin McHale, who is the audio one for all of CBS Sports. He does the lead game on the NFL. He does all of the golf. When you turn on to the Masters on Thursday morning to see the ceremonial first shot, Kevin McHale is the guy that makes sure that you can also just hear them and see them. And then, of course, Jim Nance, who he has a capacity to absorb information and get it out in a way that I've only seen maybe one other guy be able to do, and that's Mike Tirico. Nance is masterful at getting information from a variety of places, figuring out what really matters to the viewer and how it comes out best. And further to his right are two other guys, sort of the equivalent for Tony Romo. Romo wasn't yet in the booth, but Tony also has two other guys with him, one who's a statistician and one who is just there to make sure if there's anything else that's needed, running back and forth for stats from the NFL, whatever it might be, he's the guy that makes all of that information seamless. Another example of how it takes so many people to make all of this that you hear and see every weekend come together. We all know who's hitting the shot in the middle of the 14th fairway at Muirfield Village. That's Tiger Woods. Up to the left in the first circle is myself and my girl who walks with me with my replay monitor. And she's also become a really big part of the CBS traveling golf family and a former intern coming out of Abilene Christian, and her big goal is to be an NFL sideline reporter. So she has been with me now for 4 years and has really learned a lot about broadcasting, a lot about being professional, about being on time, going the extra mile, how important it is for so many people to click together to make these shows come together. To the far right, you'll see in the other circle, all dressed in black, is Wayne Richardson, and he's my spotter. He's been on the grounds for CBS Sports for about a decade and a half. I actually filled in to caddy for Sergio Garcia at a Ryder Cup when his caddy was out with an injury. But Wayne has become part of what makes what I do so much easier. So he's there to get yardage, to find out what clubs from the caddies the players are hitting, anything that he might notice while I'm running ahead trying to get into position to call the shot. But it truly is a team effort that makes everything happen, from the smallest to the biggest part of what we do at CBS. And I think that goes for everybody on this call when you're at your jobs. It's not just you, and if you take time to stop just a little bit and remember that there are so many people that really do help you do what you do best. Another thing that I think is a big plus, especially as competition in the workspace has heated up no matter what you're doing, is to have a diversified skill set. And in my situation, I'm a walking reporter. Okay, this is what I do every day of the week that we're on the air. This is my intern to my right. She's got the replay monitor, because not every shot can be shown live. Try our best, but it's really like having 18 football games going at the same time. When the NFL, for example, goes to break, there's nothing happening. When golf goes to break, there's still action on just about every hole on the golf course. And it's our job to report, decide what to report, and report on what's actually happening. Another diversified skill set I think has been really important to develop is being an interviewer. You don't know if it's going to actually go to the interviewer that we have on staff, or if because of a playoff ending in an odd place, you might be the person that has to jump in there and do that. I think it's very, very important that you remember as an interviewer to ask a question. Don't say, tell me about, or make a statement that you ask someone to agree with or disagree with. Ask a question. Ask why. Ask how. Ask when. Ask how often. Whatever it might be that fills that inquisitive space, but always ask a question and don't ask something super obvious. One of the things you also learn to do when the weather does not cooperate, and this was the weather we had at the 2015 Latin America Amateur Championship. This was not forecast, nor was it forecast that we would have a 5-hour delay. And two of the people that were tasked with being in the ESPN coverage had to leave Buenos Aires that night. So with that being said, I got thrown into doing play-by-play, which I had never done before. So you learn to develop different skills by just being thrown in the deep end, and this was a very deep end. But it worked out just fine. I mean, through the time that I'd been with NBC, with ESPN, I had listened to some of the best play-by-play people do their job, and it was important to slow down, to simplify, and keep things moving, and really just share the information you're comfortable about with each of these players that you've been listening to people talk about all week long, but now it was your turn. So it was important to be able to have that information and be adaptable enough to develop that skill. There's also information developing relationships. And in this situation, it went from being on the tee in the Proctor or the Pro-Am with Tiger Woods and the lead reporter he now works for the PGA Tour, Steve DeMeglio from USA Today. To be able to take the information you got from both of them, and by the time the day ended, turn that around to being on a live set, explaining what you thought would be, in this situation, the expectations for Tiger in his first tournament of the season. This happened to be, we were on a live set because it was also Super Bowl week, and it was in Scottsdale where the Patriots ended up winning. But it's also, as you look at this platform, to be able to transfer that and turn it into being able to use that information in a situation like this, which was a roundtable called We Need to Talk. It's on the CBS Sports Network, where we had some of the most decorated athletes in all of sports and people that have changed how we see sports, from tennis to swimming, to Dana Jacobson, who is an outstanding reporter, and be able to talk about things that were happening in women's sports at the time. And one of the big things that we talked about that particular day was Maria Sharapova and how she had been suspended for a false drug test, or a drug test that she failed, at the time. So it's important to be able to take that information, a large amount of information, a diversified amount of information, and go into different platforms. I think another big thing when you get to people who are at the top of their game is that they sometimes think they've been around it so much that they do know it all. But I think curiosity is a huge key, and especially if you've been at that job for a long time. I think I'm always curious as to how others do their jobs, both on and behind the scene. And the opportunity to go to see a live morning show, College Game Day at Syracuse a few years ago, to be able to sit in on their pre-production meeting, see how they're going to lay out their show, how they get their information, because it is very different from golf, but I think it keeps everything fresh and an idea that I think can pay off in many, many ways. I like to visit other television trucks. This one happens to be at the Latin America Amateur Championship, where it was a mobile unit. We were literally in a shipping crate to do this particular show, and to see other people that are so good at their jobs and how they manage. And I think it keeps your brain fresh and moving forward. When I'm on the road, I also like to visit other clubs, see things architecturally, operationally, agronomy-wise. One of the trips I took right before this past year's Master was the Aiken Golf Club. Just an absolute gem with a very, very small budget, and what they've been able to do with such a small crew is really outstanding, and encourage anybody, if they do get into the area, it's only about an hour from Augusta, to take that opportunity and see Aiken. It's really a pretty special place. I think another element of curiosity is kind of paying attention to what the players are doing, what their training is, what their recovery is, what their rehab is. And right now, cryotherapy is a huge thing. Hearing about it from the players, I thought, well, I'm going to try it. I now do it once a week because I do believe it works. And I'm in there for a minute 45 at some ungodly low temperature. And I really do think it helps. But it was just being curious about other players and how they're recovering that led me to give it a try. But I would also encourage you to remember about what Albert Einstein said. If you haven't made a mistake, you haven't tried anything new. Be curious, be willing to make a mistake, but keep your brain and your ideas fresh. So what do you do when you're absolutely freaking out and you don't know what you're going to talk about in front of a bunch of people, in a situation that you're not familiar, you don't consider yourself an expert, you follow the words of Judy Rankin, and you just talk about what you know. And when you're in that sort of position, it can be a very, very calming sort of thing, because we do know more than sometimes we give ourselves credit for. In one of a really cool moment, a fun moment, this is Judy talking about all of the possibilities, the extrapolations from the 2016 LPGA CME Championship, the scenarios that may play out. And to her left are both me and Tom Rinaldi looking better than we've ever looked on screen before. I would say another thing that I've found very helpful is learning from the best. I've been very, very fortunate to be around some of the best at a variety of tasks, of jobs. And my hero growing up was this guy, Seve Ballesteros. Actually, as a college student, drove 6 hours round trip to watch him hit about 40 golf balls at a PGA championship at Winged Foot. Just absolutely loved his passion, his creativity, the way he hit bunker shots. Knowing that Paul Azinger had worked with Seve on his bunker game, when I got a chance to work with Zinger at another couple of outings, I said, Zinger, what did Seve tell you? So we were all curious about learning from the best, and I had the opportunity to work with Zinger on what Seve had taught him. I was, like I said, a huge Seve fan, and in fact, Oak Hill in 1995 cashed in all of my frequent flyer miles and Marriott points to watch him play his final Ryder Cup at Oak Hill. Another guy who was never to be underestimated, Bill Harmon. He's right there in your Southern Cal PGA section, cancer survivor, and I think one of the most inspiring people that I've ever been around. He is curious, and I got to get a chance to pick the brains of the best in the industry. I considered the Harmon family just incredible teachers, but Billy probably more understated than Dick was, Craig is, and certainly Butch as well. This was a shot from an education module done in the Northeastern New York PGA section shortly after I left the board there, but it was interesting to see Bill at his best and passing along the words that his family has been so known for. I mentioned earlier Mike Tirico. I've had an opportunity to work with Mike really since I started broadcasting and was able to have his phone number, pick his brain. He's always encouraged me, as he does everybody else coming through the industry, to watch your own shows. Watch the re-airs, ask for the show links, be critical of yourself, do your homework, and be a mentor to others. And he's just been a terrific role model for me. And be critical enough of yourself so that you're constantly getting better, but not to the point that you're afraid to make the really important call. Vern Lundquist, he's Uncle Vern to so many people. And I don't, not so much because of Vern's content, put him in this sort of area, but because of the way he uses his voice as an instrument. His inflection is outstanding. It is, and when you hear the calls that he has made, he's never one to say too much, but knows just when to get out, just when to get in, when to say just enough, and say it with just the beautiful inflection that we've known Vern for so many years. Another guy who I think is at the top of his game every time he goes out to shoot is David Cannon. If you follow him on Instagram, you are constantly wowed by his ability to get the right shot at the right time. This one happened to be at the Walker Cup at Hoylake in September of this year, but among many of the shots, the iconic shots that you see in golf of current competitors, current landscapes, David Cannon has taken the shot, and to watch him work is really very special. Another I consider a guy that just does an exceptional job, and I love to listen to him, or talk to him, but also read what he has written and just watch him go about how he gathers this information, is John Hopkins. John's a UK-based golf writer who I think epitomizes a great blend of curiosity and tradition at the same time. And finally, in this section, talk about people who are just the best. I had the opportunity to watch the last two holes of Tiger before he won the Masters this year from the A truck, the control room at CBS Sports, and to watch these guys go into all hands on deck mode was absolutely phenomenal. To be able to watch that, so you'll see it in the upper, just off center. That's the real time. It was 1:55:08, so they had just about 3 holes left to play. Yeah, it's 2.5 holes left to play, because weather had pushed up the start to a 2T start, first time that had ever happened at the Masters. So they played in 3 balls, and what a great move it was, because the weather came in just before 3 o'clock, and it was pretty awful. It was a wonderful move, but it was just so cool to sit there and watch the best people do what they do under the gun of what will go down, I think, is one of the greatest comebacks of all time. Huge key here, especially as we have more and more platforms and better pictures, is tell the listeners something, the viewers, something they would not otherwise know. And what I like to do, especially if I'm going to a golf course or a tournament that I've never been to, is find somebody local on the ground that can tell you things about the history, that can tell you things about the golf course, things about where you are that you wouldn't otherwise know. And this happened to be at Muirfield, the Honorable Company, with Colonel Francis Gibb, and he was one of the older members there, been on site for however many Open Championships, Walker Cups, Curtis Cups that they'd had there at the Honorable Company, and was just a wealth of information that I never would have been able to share with the viewers had I not reached out to him. And I also did the same at Marion. I'd never been to Marion before the U.S. Open there, and to find a member that was willing to talk to me, take me around the golf course. You see no golf clubs, we didn't play. We got into the architecture, we got into the history, we got into the preparation that the club had done for the championship, and it's a really wonderful way to be able to pass that information on to the viewers. I would say one of the things that sometimes we forget as we are in the business of golf, in the world of golf, is that we really are in a lifetime relationship business. Friendships, mentors, networking opportunities, and I've been really lucky to have so many of them. Whether it's someone that you went to college with, played against, a college teammate, Curtis Cup teammate, Candy Comer, and her golf academy. She does wonderful things with juniors, with women, especially with seniors. She is just fantastic to be around and continue to learn from her. Whether it's your former competitors, Patty Sheehan and Mary B. Porter King, who was on tour when I first came on. Mary B. was a really big part of me being on the PGA's board as an independent director, but to be able to have fun with people that you've been a competitor against for so long. And Patricia Gonzalez, I think I gave a little hint about this yesterday when I put on Instagram that we would be talking about some of these relationships. Patricia played at Texas A&M at the same time when I was at Furman, and now she's coaching so many of the Latin players. She's based in Miami, and I happened to run into her at the Latin America tournament last year. She worked with a young man who was among the leading contenders, and it was just a wonderful reconnection and to learn about what she likes teaching, where she is, the kids that she's had an influence on, and the way she goes about passing along the things that she learned to them. And networking. This is an opportunity that came my way simply because I bought this woman's clothing, Catherine Way, who you see in the center, and it's turned into a wonderful relationship where I'm able to wear her clothing on CBS, do a couple of functions for her every year. And this was a networking opportunity we did at the Schwab Challenge last year at Fort Worth. And it was just a wonderful thing to have women in business. Some of them even dragged their husbands along, and we had an hour-long discussion just about what makes people successful and how that crosses over in the world of golf. I do believe that we're also very much tasked with making sure that things are sort of in line for the next generation, to provide the opportunities realize the power we have to shape the future's landscape. And what we've been able to do here in Section 2 of the New York State Public High School Athletic Association is, for the first time in over 40 years, provide an opportunity for young girls to qualify here in this section in the Albany area, one of the largest, frankly, in the whole state of New York, to qualify to go to the state championship. That had never happened before. When I came through this section, we had to play against the boys. There was no opportunity for girls. And the young lady who won, Kennedy Swedick, is a whopping 12 years old. She shot 76 on a very chilly morning and will have a very, very bright future. But it was more about the opportunity and seeing these girls really grasp the opportunity they had in front of them as trailblazers, as ones that, when you start to talk about the history of Section 2 athletics, of girls golf, that they will be the ones who really were in a position to make that difference. Another way we work around here is at the golf course I grew up at. My teacher designed the golf course as we have golf camps, and they spanned over 3 weeks. 3 years ago, we started with 15 kids. We're now up to 60 plus and awarded by scholarship. Some of it is academically motivated. Some of it is being able to be on the golf course by themselves, knowing the rules, being respectful of other people that are on the golf course with them. And it's been just a terrific thing to see the way we are able to grow the game in this area and the way it has been so well received. And we're also in a position as people in and around golf to be inspired by these kids. The young man on the left, Connor Handley, he was diagnosed in the spring with stage 3 cancer. As of last week, I got a message from him. He is now in remission, going back to be able to do PT, be able to rehab, to get back on the golf course, because what kept him going through all of his chemo from this whole summer was golf. And while he was feeling okay after the first couple of rounds, he actually played in the New Jersey State Open and shot his lowest round, which was 76. We also are in a position to lay the groundwork for future members of the media. This is Sam Goldberg, who was my first runner at NBC, and he's now working for golf.com. And the girls that are around me during the summer at CBS, Mara Burton on the left is a communications member, or a major at Furman University, and my intern MK, to be able to just get them into doors, into opportunities where they're going to be able to thrive and be that next generation. I would also encourage you to embrace history, whether it's at the Honorable Company of Edinburgh Golfers, and the largest, most powerful collection there is really in the whole world, the oldest trophies in the whole world, being able to be around legends of the LPGA like I was with Patty Berg and Kathy Whitworth, or to be able to cover the Champions Challenge at the Old Course with Peter Thompson down there hitting a shot into the 17th at the road hole at St. Andrews. It is really special to be able to understand history and be able to then translate it on and make the game better overall for it. Preparation, huge thing. And I'll give you a couple of slides about how I prepare, whether I'm in the tower or on the ground. This is from the Northern Trust this past year. You'll see highlighted the holes that I have assigned to cover, trying to get the most important nuggets out there, who played what holes well, what the stats were, and overall notes. You see in the upper left, that was the note about Tiger Woods. WD, just as we went on the air, withdrew mild oblique strain. Important to be a little bit flexible when it comes to that. Work hard, play hard. You're around a lot of people that work a lot of hours, and it's important to really embrace them as well. Whether it's with Arnold and Kari Webb, I lost a bet with this one. I bet Tiger wasn't going to win the Masters, so I had to dress up as Tiger Woods, and that had to go on social media after a podcast blew out. people like this, like Mike Tirico, just a wonderful guy, great sense of humor. Trish Ferguson, makeup gal, travels with ESPN week in and week out, and they become your family. So it's important to, like I said, work hard, play hard. And even Bill Polian from the Indianapolis Colts. Everybody loves a golf lesson, no matter if you're in a studio in Bristol, Connecticut, or if you are out on the golf course itself. And of course, there's our Jeffrey Shafter. We sign off every night when we were at ESPN with something fun with Shafter from the UK. 10 hours on the air, you got to have a little bit of fun with it. This is huge, flexible confidence, because things don't always go exactly as we lay them out. Even John Kulo this morning, we tried to get on the line and the internet connection was down. So he climbs up on the roof at the club and tries to reboot the whole system. So you kind of roll with it, because it isn't often perfect. But rain delays happen. This was this year at the Byron Nelson, and you never know when you're going to get your next nap, and you're going to be on the air until dark. So you might as well take your nap when you get a chance. And you never know when wind's going to blow in so much that you can't play. This was at the 2015 Open Championship at St. Andrews. We were on the air 8 hours and never saw a live golf shot. So you got to roll with it. Come up with things that keep people engaged, and that is really what it's all about: being in business and being in the golf business. You don't play golf in a dome, and you never know what's going to come your way. Another big part of what we face today is social media, and it can be positive and it can be horribly negative. But the positives, I believe, are using it for homework. I use it a lot for homework, for your own branding. And one of the things, I follow a lot of players, and you wouldn't have known that Charlie Hoffman's girls just got a puppy, and he lost the battle, and they ended up with the puppy. So that'll be something that we will probably get on the air at some point early in the season. This is the personal interest stuff about Max Homa and how he was finally able to get his mom not to work a second job. Great stuff to get out on the air, the positive side of social media. And injuries. Players are pretty free putting out things that are not good, why they've withdrawn from a tournament. This one happened to be Ian Poulter last week, and he is now back playing again. The negatives. And you do need a thick skin, and I think to be mindful that it can eat up a lot of time. This was one that came through in 2015 after I'd done an ESPN hit. Not so pleasant. Another that came through after the Riviera tournament this past year. But I think this is a great policy. And it was a quote by Eleanor Roosevelt, that no one can make you feel inferior without your consent. They may try, but you got to be above it. Second to last nugget, I think is really important, is we tend to get really siloed in golf, and it tends to be I think it can run on an area that can get pretty small, because it does take so much time. It takes a lot of effort. There's a lot going on in the game, but to be involved in your community. I happen to be a big proponent of, as I've talked about history, but this is our 9/11 memorial here in Saratoga Springs, and I head up a large group. This was our group last month that takes care of this pocket park, and it's turned out to be just a wonderful thing, where I've met a lot more people living in a small town in and around our region, and being able to support local fundraisers and never know who you're going to run across. So this was a walk for cancer, and it was a tennis coach from my high school, and it turned out to be just a great catch up. So get out, do different things in your community. Even if it comes to parking cars, when American Pharoah comes to Saratoga, and the pals who need a little bit of help own a couple of parking lots, connect with your community. It's really a great thing. And in a situation where I am, I'm in national sports, but I also love the people that work in our area. Chris Autorado and Ashley Miller have become very, very good friends, and they've just launched a new web space, a new podcast, and it was great to be able to support them and really take a little time to learn about our local media and our local sports. And finally, I would encourage everybody, it ties a little bit in with that community involvement, is to have balance. And I was pretty fortunate to have a lot of this on tour. I traveled with that guy, my Black Chow Chow Furman, for 14 years on tour, or excuse me, 11 years. And this one for 14, JP. We knew where every park was, and to be able to see and have life through them instead of having everything so golf involved was, I think, a large part of my success. I love my garden space. I love to create out there. I love to experiment. Some things go well, some things do not. But I don't buy a flower in a flower shop from about middle of May on until our first frost. And this was just one of the things that came churning out in September. I also like to get out and do other things at other sites when I can. Same garden spaces. This one happened to be at St. Andrews, looking over the sands and over the golf course. But this was a private garden. You walked up and you dumped a little donation into their box, and you could go all through their yard. And it was just outstanding. Canoeing. Get out and be active. I canoe. I love to go shoot. I ski. I do a lot of different things, and I think it keeps you fresh. Gives you another opportunity to look at golf through a different lens. I love fast cars, so I had a chance to go down to Monticello and get in a race car. Take my own car down there and get on the racetrack too. But for me, it was also an opportunity to really focus hard on something that was pretty dangerous at a fast pace. And release some energy. So I love that sort of stuff. And I do love to be able to be in a place where I can have that time to look at remarkable things. And this just happened to be something that caught my eye in my garden this past summer on a bush of a rose bush, this wonderful dragonfly that was really translucent, and it really caught my eye. So, as I kind of wrap this up, these are some of the things that I've found to be very helpful, not only from a playing standpoint, but also from a broadcasting standpoint. And I'm constantly reminded how many jobs, how many experiences, how many places are woven together, and how we are just in a wonderful place to be able to share that with so many people if we can just take the time to enjoy it and really take that time for a little perspective when the world seems to be running at a faster and more compressed pace than ever. We are really in a great space in the world of golf. So with that, John, I think you've been able to take in a few questions, and I'd like to turn it back over.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Dottie. First question comes in from Nikki Gatch, who of course you know.
Yeah.
When are you and Tony Romo coming out to play with us in SoCal?
Well, I will be out in SoCal for the San Diego event, the Farmers Insurance, the last week of January. And wouldn't it be cool if Tony Romo would join us on a PGA Tour telecast at CBS? It's all he wanted to talk about when I was over there at the Foxborough game. And last week, the audio technician clipped a shot of him at halftime working on his golf swing in the studio. So I think there's a chance, Nikki.
Can you talk a little bit about the Korean influence on the LPGA Tour and where you see that evolving on a global scale?
I think the Korean influence was, as many people know, set in motion in 1998 when Sairi Pak won 2 major championships on the LPGA Tour, and it has not stopped, and I don't see it stopping. What I do see is an even greater influence when the players in China will become part of that influx of players that are coming from the Far East. And it is work ethic, it is focus, it is determination, it's great teaching, because many of the best teachers in this country have now gone over there or are able to bring bring players to the United States to work with them, whether it's at academies or personally. I see it as hyper-driven people that this will not end soon, nor should it. They are outstanding people, and they're really great players.
Do you see a potential for other countries to embrace the game, such as South Korea has?
I do. And I think you're going to see it. You've seen the Latin influence. You've seen great success with what the Masters, the USGA, the RNA have done with the Asia Pacific Amateur Championship, with the Latin America Amateur Championship, with taking the Women's Amateur World Golf Rankings and doing the Augusta National Women's Championship. I think you're definitely going to see people embrace this more globally. And first thing I would say that popped off my email last week is that they're doing a rules seminar in Spanish for the first time. The USGA will be doing that. So you can see the influence of where the game is going.
And this one comes in from Bob Madsen. It would be great if stars would thank their PGA professionals publicly. Your thoughts, please.
I would agree. I think that's wonderful, but I do think it's also happening a little bit more. You look at George Gankis and how his players are so openly, they're effusive about believing in him and thanking him, and guys like Boyd Summerhays. I certainly owed a great deal of my success and appreciation to my PGA professional, George Pulver, and I do. I think that should happen more. I would also note that when I was on the board, there was an emphasis on trying to get one of the billboards on one of the graphics every week on the PGA Tour telecast, but not only listed the superintendent but the PGA professional, and that is definitely continued.
In regards to the time you spent with George as your instructor, was it continuous over the years, or did you see him at times in stretches? Did you see other people in between? Can you talk a little bit about that, Dottie?
Sure. I did not see anybody else once I started working with Mr. Pulver. And because he was in upstate New York, we saw each other on a pretty regular basis, mostly on driving range. He watched me play on the golf course from afar, but we never had an active playing lesson. And I always came back when I was at college, the first 2 years I was at college, came back, and we constantly wrote letters. After every lesson, he typed a one-page letter about everything that we worked on. And it was almost always fundamentals. But he also would leave books in my parents' mailbox with suggestions about things that I should be reading, whether it was on Sam Snead, whether it was on golf course architecture, whether it was on club making. He forbid me from reading anything in golf magazines about instruction. I could read all about the people and the places, but I could not read instruction because he didn't want to undo on what he felt like was the soup du jour. So he said, no instruction, read everything else. Learn how people are practicing, what their clubs are, all of that sort of stuff. But he was very much a fundamental sort of teacher, very simple. And I was just extremely fortunate and frankly very lost after he passed.
Dottie, I don't have any further questions this morning. I do have a response from Nikki. She says, yes, see you in January.
Absolutely. I think Romo would be great to chime in on our CBS Golf. I think he'd be terrific. He would bring the perspective of a great competitor, but also somebody who is so addicted to the game.
Yes, he certainly is. Dottie, we know how valuable your time is. Thank you very, very much for making the arrangements to speak to us today, to let us in on your life a little bit. It's been fascinating for me. I'm sure it has been for everybody on the call this morning. For all the attendees on this morning's Catalyst, as usual, the 10-question quiz that generates the MSR point for attending this morning's Catalyst will be going out shortly. Please take the quiz and return it to Sharon Kerfman at the section office, skerfman@pgahq.com. A score of 70% or higher will earn 1 MSR credit for attending. This is our last Catalyst of the year. We don't have another one in November nor December, and we'll be starting up with a fresh calendar of Catalysts in 2020 on the, for the most part, on the 2nd and the 4th Thursday of each month. But thank you very much for your participation and your support, and for taking advantage of the Catalyst. Dottie, thank you again for your time. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you very much for supporting the Catalyst. Bye-bye.